Welcome back to the Mainstream. John, how you going this week?
I'm flourishing, Dan, but before we talk about the week, you're looking very smart.
Thought I'd dress up for the podcast. 140,000 viewers. Want to look sharp, want to look my best. So.
Any other reason?
Well, I've just come back from the Senate committee that we were summoned to appear before. I think we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, which was the one into misinformation and disinformation regarding climate change. And this is a Senate committee that was set up, or it's chaired by a Greens senator, Peter Whish-Wilson, and one of the deputies the deputy is a Labor senator. And in a nutshell, the crux of this is that the Institute of Public Affairs and other organisations like Advance Australia are disseminating misinformation about climate change, and we're terrible people that need to be shut down. So we appeared.
So has this inquiry investigated the BBC or not yet?
I'm not sure if its jurisdiction extends to the United Kingdom, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be extending to the ABC, or maybe, as has been said, there's misinformation, disinformation, and Chris-information. Chris Bowen's fake
I haven't heard that.
That's not mine. That's not me. It's not a Daniel original. But we were originally scheduled to be there for an hour. They held us there for an hour and a half. They were very interested. I'll tell you one thing. The Labor senator, you know what she reckons? You ran the IPA for 17 years. Did you have an accounts department, John?
Not to my knowledge.
She was under the impression that we had an extensive accounts department, and she requested detailed information about our travel and our travel bills. This is the kind of question... Yeah. This is the kind of stuff.
Our travel.
Yeah, our travel bills, our receipts. I said, do you want to know what I eat at the airport before I get on a plane? Like how?
So you've just walked into the studio 5 minutes ago, straight from the appearance with Scott Hargreaves.
With Scott?
Executive Director. I caught 15 minutes of it. Give us the highlights and save the best till last.
Oh, well, I've given you one, which is the accounts department, and we're going to put all this up. It's going to be a great fundraising opportunity for us.
When you tell viewers what you said to Senator Michelle Ananda Raja, the Victorian Labor Senator.
Deputy Chair,
I think our social media is going to explode.
Well, so why
don't you go with that one?
I'll start with that. Yeah, so the question, well, there wasn't really many questions. It was more a series of unsubstantiated assertions. Peter Whish-Wilson kicked off by saying, are you proud of your climate disruption? I merely asked him to define what climate disruption means, which of course he struggled to do.
So when you said that, what did he say?
Oh, he went to his notes and then quoted an email that I'd written. And I had said, yeah, I wrote it. I know what I've said. Thank you. And then he started verbaling me about how we're killing net zero. And I just asked him, have I used the word kill? No. Oh, so you're misquoting an email that's right in front of you. Okay, it's interesting.
Did you say that bit?
Yeah, words to that effect. Have a look at the video. I did say we've broken the back of net zero, which we have on the basis of our research, and we're very proud of that. But I think, John, I'll be interested in your...
So they're recoiling from
I just think,
someone actually responding to their questions and giving as good as...
I'm always happy to engage respectfully with senators if they engage respectfully with us. And if they kick off a proceeding verbaling what we do and what we say... we're not going to stand for that.
So are you saying that questions to the IPA from Green senators and Labor senators weren't necessarily in good faith?
I certainly don't think that was the case. It's almost as if there was an agenda.
No. Did you shake hands at the end?
No, we didn't, but I don't actually have any problems with, to be honest, I don't have any problems with Peter Whish-Wilson. I think he's probably a more thoughtful Greens. I don't think he's the worst person at all. But we didn't shake hands.
And while I'm watching this exchange, I am thinking the Greens were the only people who stood up against the social media ban that is but a month away. And as it dawns upon us, we'll be talking about that more and what a disaster it will be at every level.
Well, the Greens also opposed the misinformation laws, ironically. So the Labor they opposed.
So the misinformation laws first proposed by the coalition.
Yeah, then turbocharged by Labor. I think they opposed it. The laws didn't even get to the floor of the Senate, and I think that was because, at least, I know all the crossbenchers said no, and I'm pretty sure, I have to go back and look, I'm pretty sure the Greens said no.
Which is such a shame, because on some things, the Greens are not terrible.
Yeah, but now they're chairing a committee on misinformation to shut down debate.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, that's where I've come from, John. That was fun. But this is what you do at the IPA. You got to front up to these McCarthyist show trials and, defend our turf.
Is that how you started your...
No, I didn't.
Was that the preface?
No, I didn't kick off with that. No,
I'm here under sufferance.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go, but you got to go to these things. So if you're going to go, have a bit of fun.
It sounds like you did.
I didn't get in too much trouble, so that's all right. I live to fight another day. Hi, thanks for watching the new podcast with John and myself. Hey, did you know that about 70% of those who watch this podcast are not yet subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? Do us a favour, hit subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of the action. And while you're at it, click the link on the screen to go to the Institute of Public Affairs website where you can sign up for the latest news and research from the IPA. Now, back to the chat.
We were, until the appearance this morning, we were talking yesterday about how we were going to start this episode, and you told me about your week, and I was really excited, and I said there's hope and there's optimism, and it begins and it ends in Adelaide.
It does. Well, I had two exciting things. I went to see Metallica, who were playing at the Adelaide Oval, one of my favourite bands. And I went.
They're solidly Republican?
I don't know which way they vote, but I can tell you there's no Welcome to Country. There was AC/DC played before the start, long way to the top.
That was the Welcome to Country.
To Bon Scott and the Young Brothers. Yeah, well, that's the Welcome to Country you should have. And the Christmas pageant I went to.
So what's that? You mentioned this to me. I hadn't.
Yeah, this is interesting.
I hadn't heard of it.
This is interesting. So this is massive. So there were an estimated 320,000 people that were there. And it's been going for donkey's years. I remember going as a kid and loved it. And now I've got two young daughters, and we've taken them. Last year was the first year, then we went this year. And basically there's about 100 floats that come through tangentially related to Christmas. There's people on skateboards and a variety of things. There was Father Christmas, not gender neutral Christmas.
Really?
And I was dreading the Welcome to Country. I thought we're going to get a Welcome to Country because...
You get probably more than one.
Yeah, because we sat in the same spot this year as we did last year. And last year, Jane Lomax-Smith, who's the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, we call her Jane Slomax-Smith because she wants 30km/h speed zones in Adelaide, of course. Isn't
that the speed you travel anyway in Adelaide?
I wish.
That's my South Australian joke.
It is because of all the congestion that's there. It ain't what it used to be. And she, either she gave it or someone else, I can't remember exactly, but we got there, nothing. There was no announcements, no grandiose political statements. There was nothing political there at all. Now, maybe, you don't get to be the whole area. You have a particular spot. We're at Victoria Square, which is sort of the main area, but I didn't hear anything like that. Nothing political, no politicians speaking. And you know what? It reminded me of the reason I love Christmas, which is that people actually had a good time. People were having fun. Families were there. It's a tradition for the kids to draw chalk on the roads before the pageants come through. All the kids have bubbles, waving bubbles. Everyone's having a good time, in good spirits. And it reminds you that there is still a place that exists in our society outside of politics where people can just enjoy their lives without being berated.
You did have one criticism.
Of the pageant?
It was in November.
Oh, it's too early. So what's the date today? So we're recording on the 12th. I think it was Saturday, so say it was the 6th or something. My kids are now full bore on Christmas already. So we've already got the Christmas tree up. We've
in
already,
November?
Yeah.
Real or fake?
It's a fake one in the living room.
Oh, Dan.
It's a 2-year-old and a real tree don't mix.
Okay.
So we will get a real tree.
And it does take you half an hour to clean up the water after you've spilled it, putting in the tree into the stand.
Yeah, every day.
For
the next 60 days. So we're full bore.
And then your vacuum clogs up
Yeah.
when you're vacuuming the needles.
Yeah, so it's full bore Christmas at the Wild household already. So I'm more of my festive period is 1 December to 26 January.
Yeah.
But we've extended that now to the start of November.
And you've just been recovering from Halloween.
Well, we don't
Good.
abide by that at all. So
I love America, but it's an Americanization that has no place in this country.
Here. On to the news, John. I reckon we chat about our favourite topic, Net Zero Watch.
Well, you've just been talking to the Greens about Net Zero.
Net Zero Watch, John. So what's the latest on Net Zero? We're here. There's a party room meeting of the Liberal Party today. Will they, won't they? Are they going to ditch it? Are they not going to ditch it? Are they going to stay in Paris, not stay in Paris? Once again, we made the prediction on the Mainstream that the Liberals will dump Net Zero this year, and it looks more and more likely by the day that that is going to happen.
I think that is going to happen. Today there was some new polling on Net Zero, and of course IPA polling, other organisations polling has indicated that the claim that the public are resolutely behind Net Zero is wrong. There was some polling published today in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Only 26% of Australians think net zero should be kept in the law. 31% say net zero should be dumped in some form, 15% are uncertain, and 28% think net zero should only be an aspiration, whatever that means. So, that confirms what we know, which is this claim that the Liberal moderates have made, which is the public have voted for climate change, is not accurate. What struck me about the poll is the argument is also made that unless the Liberals follow the Labor Party and the Greens and keep net zero, then young people are going to be lost forever. Well, the numbers, again, don't indicate that. Only 28% of 18 to 34-year-olds think net zero should be kept in the law. 28%.
So it's less than 30.
Less than 30. 19%. After, again, as we've spoken about, after decades of being told that climate change is destroying the planet, 19% of that age group, 18 to 34, say net zero should be dumped, and 22% say it's undecided. They're undecided. So the IPA's media toolbox and the media toolbox of others must be working well. And I say media toolbox deliberately because when I was watching you on the Senate inquiry, I wrote down media toolbox and I thought to myself, after misogyny, I'm going to ask you about your media toolbox exchange with Senator Michelle Ananda Raja. What was that one? There were so many highlights.
Yeah, so many. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like our engagement with regional communities and what kind of media toolbox do we have to help them or whatever. And I just asked her, what's a media toolbox? And I didn't actually get an answer.
And I was
it's almost like she was just making stuff up.
This was the bit I saw, and you said, what's a media toolbox? And she said, media toolbox. And you said something like, and the record might correct me, you said something like, well, you used the word media toolbox. You tell me what you think it is.
I still don't know what a media toolbox is.
Well, the media toolbox, or whatever it is, and whoever's using it, is certainly convincing Australians that net zero is not the policy that the country should be following. But, what strikes me about the Liberal and the Coalition debate is even if the Coalition, Liberal Party, Nationals, oppose net zero in some form, are they going to prosecute the case? I have zero confidence in the Liberal Party, based on the last 10 years of its track record, that it has any capacity to prosecute the case for the higher prices, the industries being closed, manufacturing moving offshore, that net zero is bringing about. The Liberal Party didn't prosecute the case against The Voice. It was one or two MPs, of course, led by Senator Nambajimba Price, Jacinta. The Liberal Party didn't prosecute the case against Anthony Albanese's superannuation, retrospective superannuation taxes. The Liberal Party has, until this week most likely, supported net zero since 2021. So all of a sudden, the Liberal Party is going to display bravery, it is going to display fortitude, it is going to fight against every civil society organisation, literally every business organisation in the country supporting net zero is going to fight against every apparatus of the state and the media and oppose net zero. Isn't this all academic, and isn't it all further academic because the Coalition is very unlikely to win 30 seats at the next federal election to come anywhere close to government?
Well, I think...
So what are we actually doing here?
Yeah. Well, I think you put your finger on something important, which is that you can't just say you're dumping something or doing something. You are actually going to have to tell people what you're doing. And I don't think there's any capacity within the Coalition to do that. So whilst I will be very pleased at the soon-to-be dumping of net zero... that's really the beginning of what you need to do.
It's the beginning of a process.
And if you don't really believe it...
Yeah, they know. The public know.
And the last leader we really had to do it was Tony Abbott, who opposed the zeitgeist, the total, as you mentioned, all of the nodes of cultural and economic production were in favour of the carbon tax, or ETS. And Tony came along and said, nope, we're not doing that. And he campaigned on it day in, day out, and explained to the public why it was bad for Australia. That is what you have to do, and I don't think they're going to do it.
You were with Tony Abbott last night in Adelaide.
I did. Well, it's the third good Adelaide thing. We launched Tony Abbott's book.
We're going to talk about the book.
In Adelaide last night. It was sold out at a great pub, the Arkabar, one of the great establishments.
So what did you say, 300 people, 350
I think it was 350 I was told were there, so it's packed out to talk about a book that actually talks about Australia without saying we're a bad country. No wonder it's flying off the shelves, John.
We'll talk about that.
I wanted to get your thoughts on what some of the moderates have been saying. Andrew Bragg, some others. Andrew Bragg was on ABC Insiders, and for my sins I had to watch it because I was required to comment on it on Sky News. I very rarely watch anything on the ABC, but he basically said, I'll go to the backbench if they dump net zero. Will he do that? So this week they'll probably dump net zero, or next week. Do you think Andrew Bragg will go to the backbench and be a man of his word?
Look, I don't know, but it raises a broader issue, which is, again, what we've talked about, which is how big a tent is the Liberal Party. Net zero and everything it entails is one of the defining issues of our time, and the left and the Greens are absolutely right about this. It entails government and state control over every single aspect of our lives, from what we can eat to how fast we can drive to what we can do with our lives, what we can spend our money on. And those who support this scheme, I think, have very little in common with those who don't. The problem with the Liberal Party and the coalition more broadly is so net zero, as the Labor Party has said, has been around as a concept for some 20 years. The coalition signed up to it in 2021, basically without a debate under Scott Morrison's diktat, and they've only now realised it's a problem. So how do you campaign against something that you've supported for 20 years?
Well, I think you can. You just got to explain it.
But don't you have to explain what has led to this change? Don't you have to say, sorry, I got it wrong? Organisations like the IPA, like the great Bob Carter, people like Bob Carter, Ian Plimer, Dick Lindzen in the States, you were right, we were wrong.
Well, they're not going to say that. But what they need to do is at least explain why they've changed their position. Yeah. Which is kind of what Scott Morrison said. Not that I think what he says is particularly believable, but of course you can. I mean, the coalition did support the carbon tax, then they didn't. Now, they changed leader who took it in a different direction.
They did support misinformation laws until they didn't. They supported the social media laws that they're now criticising the implementation of.
They did. So
I think we'll wait and see. But this is a process of that's going to take months and years. If the coalition was to wholeheartedly engage in a debate and start questioning Anthony Albanese about the details of the policy, it will become undone very, very quickly, just like The Voice. So Anthony Albanese got away with supporting The Voice, and as we know, at some in 2021, I think The Voice had something like 70% approval rating.
I think that might have been the start of 23.
Well, at 21, and then
back in 21. Okay.
As far back as that, when it was just a theory.
Right.
But then when Anthony Albanese was asked, how will it actually work, when someone actually questioned him, he had no answers. And I think if the Liberals and the coalition were to embrace a debate about net zero, Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party will very quickly become undone. And just as happened with The Voice, if you have one of the two major parties questioning it, then the mainstream legacy media that of course supported The Voice and of course supports net zero will then eventually have to start asking the difficult questions. But, I saw a little example of the Liberals' failure to prosecute a case. I actually think what Susan Lee said about Anthony Albanese wearing that Joy Division T-shirt when he came back from the United States was absolutely correct at a time of rampant anti-Semitism, at a time of social cohesion coming apart. Anthony Albanese wearing a T-shirt like that was sending a terrible signal, especially when the Labor Party are looking for Nazis around every single corner. He was wearing a T-shirt that encapsulated basically a Nazi term. And Susan Lee was absolutely right to call this out. She should have been supported by her colleagues. She should have been supported by Australia's mainstream Jewish organisations, and everyone went silent. And what Susan Lee should have done is then double down. Every day in Parliament, she should have said, how can you complain and how can you talk about anti-Semitism in Australia when you are wearing that T-shirt? What did you think you would do wearing that T-shirt? And then all the mainstream media that support every claim against neo-Nazis, every claim against any so-called fascist wearing a mask, they were all saying, this is nothing to look at. This is an absolutely secondary issue. Why doesn't she focus on the big things? Well, I tell you what the big thing is. It is social cohesion in our community, is rampant anti-Semitism, and I was disgusted by the Prime Minister wearing that T-shirt. And Susan Lee has to understand that the complete lack of support she got for making a really important, good point, she is going to face, if she embraces the abandonment of net zero, she is going to face that again. Her colleagues abandoned her. She made a good point of principle. Now, whatever motivated it, and some people say it was Sherry Markson on Sky, some people say it was other things, I think she did exactly the right thing, and she was abandoned by everyone. And so now we're going to have the Liberal Party abandon net zero, and everyone's going to then campaign for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is...
I've been wanting to say that about that T-shirt for some time. It's now 2 weeks old, but I needed to get that off my chest.
That's good. It's a bit of a contrarian take, actually, because most people had...
And I have every New Order album. I have every Joy Division album. I love their music, but the name was entirely inappropriate. Again, people said, well, they've apologised for the name, and Bernard Sumner's done that, and others. Yes, they have. But it was absolutely inappropriate, and none of the media held Albanese to account. And again, Lee has to be aware of this. None of the media are going to be holding Albanese to account on net zero until the Liberal Party and the Coalition prosecute that case, just like The Voice.
Yeah. Well, net zero is such a bad policy that it won't withstand a political contest.
If there's a contest. If
there's a contest, net zero will be completely defeated, just like The Voice. Yeah. It's such a bad policy that it's indefensible, but it's whether or not there is a contest. John, something interesting that came out over the last week was a survey that was put out by the McKinnon Foundation, which I would categorise broadly to the left. They would consider themselves centrist, but they're certainly not on the right. It's certainly not a
centrist code for left.
An IPA survey, which can't be trusted. But I went through, it's about 100-something questions in there, and I think there was over 4,000 Australians who were surveyed.
So it's a big survey.
This is a very big. So for context, I think the News Poll survey published in The Australian is about 1,100 or 1,200, and that's fairly robust. So this 4,000 is a big survey. So you're getting pretty good results from this. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of components of this, which I think are really, really interesting, which actually haven't been commented upon much.
Even though they're from a centrist.
Yeah, they haven't. It's sort of been glossed over a bit, and I just don't think anyone's read.
Maybe it doesn't fit the narrative, Dan.
Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But if we talk about trust and honesty in government and politicians, so only 35% of Australians were said to have high trust in federal politicians. This is a really interesting one. Only 24% believe Australia's federal politicians understand and represent people like them. So if you're at a barbecue and you're standing around with 4 people, only 1 of the 4 on average will think that their representatives understand them. I mean, that to me was the most startling result, and it's something that we've been talking about now for years.
And that explains the declining two-party vote, that explains the rise in new media seeking to represent views that aren't presented in the mainstream. It explains a lot of our present discontents.
It does, yeah, it does. And only 20% believe federal politicians are honest. I actually put this to the committee in my opening statement.
You haven't told me this. I missed this bit.
Well, I read this out. I just said this is the environment.
So you said this to the Greens and Labor senators?
No, it's in my opening statement.
Yeah, I just
said, yeah.
What did you say?
I read out the results, and then the point being that if you have misinformation laws, then it's going to be the very people that Australians don't trust that are going to be enforcing it. So how's that going to work? But here, on the topic of
what did they say?
Well, it's my opening statement, so they actually politely let me read it out, which often they don't, to be honest. Often they try to hurry you up, but there's tactics to get around it. So
this is not your first rodeo.
No, what you can do is you can measure how long other organisations had, and you go, well, hang on, the average has been 5 minutes, you've cut me off at 3.
Well, the Australia Institute in Grattan got 15 minutes, give me 5.
Yeah, come on. But here's one on misinformation that this hasn't been reported in the media at all, but I think this is the second biggest finding behind the one I just read out. So only 20% of Australians do not believe that they have access to quality information on policy issues they care about. And 75% said they are confident in their ability to tell the difference between trustworthy and untrustworthy sources of information online. In other words, misinformation is a non-issue in the public. It is a fiction of the political class to use it as a smokescreen to engage in censorship. Australians, by this survey, by McKinnon, not the IPA, by McKinnon, are saying, I'm pretty okay with making up my own mind. Thank you very much. So I thought that was very interesting finding.
Well, it's interesting because that finding follows this year's Boyer lectures on the ABC, and this year the ABC has decided not to have a single lecturer, but to have a number. And John Anderson gave a very good lecture on democracy. But the first lecture was given by Justin Wolfers, an Australian who's a professor of economics in the US, and it was interesting his take, which to me represents the elite take on democracy, which is that Australian democracy is thriving, even though, as you've just identified, we know that it probably isn't. And what he said was striking to me about how he justifies the tight hold of the factions and the two-party system over our politics. So he says, and he says this as a good thing, our politicians almost always vote the party line, and inside the party, the factional line. This actually makes our institutions more responsive because there are fewer veto players and hence less gridlock. No, it makes it less responsive because if you do not have a view that toes the factional line, you are shut out of the political debate, as has happened recently over the last few years with net zero. And then he says, and this is my favourite line, and factional and party leaders are specialist deal makers, constantly weighing competing interests and electoral consequences. Well, that's the problem, I would say. And then he says, strong party unity doesn't destroy democratic deliberation. It just relocates it from the parliament to the party room. Now, for me, that's the antithesis of democracy. That's the elite argument for tight political control by factional players haggling in smoke-filled rooms about the electoral politics, not about what the public might seek or demand or want. And that gives rise to populism, Dan.
Ooh, and then, the bogeyman. And what is populism?
No,
is it just opinions I don't agree with?
That's exactly what it is. And then again, another elite argument. Our independent public service gives us continuity and advice without fear or favour. I'd take career professionals any day over the rookies inside the White House. Okay, the career professionals who live in Canberra, who voted 65% yes or more for The Voice, who don't represent mainstream Australians, who've got no connection with mainstream Australians, but are career professionals in their secure, well-paying jobs. That's the elite argument for democracy. I respect him for making that argument. I think he's entirely misconceived. And that's the explanation as to why people don't trust government.
Yep.
And the McKinnon, I had a look after you mentioned the McKinnon survey to me. It's completely consistent with other surveys. So I think we've talked about the Edelman survey, which is by a public affairs company. They survey the public in some 28 countries. The Australian public distrust the government. and they are at a similar scale to distrust of the US, of the public of the US government. But what is really striking, and this comes back to the elite's attempt to control and censor the media, the public of Australia, its distrust of the media is the third highest out of all 28 countries surveyed.
Wow.
So our mistrust of government is high, but about the standard. But when you ask Australians, do you trust the media, it is only, the distrust of the media is only higher, interestingly, in Japan and the UK.
Wow. Well, that's also reflected in this McKinnon one. So the question that they had was, how often do journalists provide fair coverage during elections in Australia? Only 24% said often or very often. 41% said sometimes, and 30% said rarely or never, and the rest didn't have an opinion. So that's astonishing that less than a quarter. So the question is about elections, right? So this is not even about general debate. This is about elections, and fewer than a quarter say often or very often are journalists fair. I mean, this is why as you say, the trust is declining, but also it contributes to the fragmentation in society, because people can't look. When people read things, they don't believe it anymore. And COVID contributed to that with the deterioration of trust in our health system. When you have public health officers wearing lab coats, standing up there saying, oh yes, you have to stay 2 meters away from everybody, this is very serious. And then Brett Sutton comes out and said, oh yeah, maybe lockdowns, there are alternatives. What? You locked us down for 2 years and you're just telling us now there are alternatives, and now you're complaining that people don't trust the health system or the media or politicians?
After the media refused to ask any questions. And
not only that, but actually reinforced what governments were doing.
And when Peter Credlin was one of the few members of the media who did question what was happening, the media turned on her for asking tough questions.
Yeah, you're not really a journalist, you're a commentator, you're not allowed to be here.
Well, maybe only commentators who are outside of the media bubble have the courage and bravery to ask difficult questions, because Peter Credlin, I don't know, maybe one day Peter Credlin might go and want to be a media advisor to a Labor government. But unlike most of the media, that's not the job she wants after she leaves legacy media.
Exactly. They're all feather bedding. They don't want to criticise the government because they want a job with the government. That's why we are where we are. John, you mentioned a couple of books, including
my favourite segment,
Tony Abbott's book. Your favourite segment?
Shall we move to my favourite segment?
John's favourite segment.
Okay, what I've been reading this week. Well, of course, I haven't just been reading it this week. Tony Abbott's History of Australia was launched a few weeks ago. I haven't been just reading it this week because it's been a project of the Institute of Public Affairs, and with Tony as a senior fellow at the IPA and a number of outstanding researchers here at the IPA. This has been a work years in the making. It's an outstanding work. It is already into its second printing. I think sales are now up to 50,000.
Wow!
It was, I think, the first or second best-selling book on Australia's biggest book-selling site, Booktopia. And as I wrote in my column in the Financial Review, it was second behind also a uniquely Australian cookbook on the Arnott's cookbook.
Oh, wow.
On how to make recipes out of Arnott's biscuits. But I was chatting to an IPA member who lives in Tamworth, and he said that he was into one of the bookshops there to get a copy, and the bookseller said, sorry, we've sold out. It is the best-selling book since Harry Potter in Tamworth. We love Tamworth.
In Tamworth, right?
We love Tamworth. So it's an outstanding piece of work for many reasons. One, it's got as people have said, a unique perspective of a former Prime Minister. It is written by someone who has a love of country and someone who understands the success that Australia is, how fragile our success is, that we have a history to be proud of, and that the parts of our history that we shouldn't be proud of, we should recognise and acknowledge, but also talk about that in the larger consequence. So Tony Abbott writes about the famous Mile Creek Massacre of the 1830s, and Australian school children learn about the Mile Creek Massacre, but very few Australians would know that there was a hero Solicitor General in New South Wales, an Irish Catholic Plunkett, who fought for the prosecution for murder of the perpetrators of the Mile Creek Massacre. And after the first jury was discharged, in the face of the whole Sydney elite being against the prosecution, he fought and led a second prosecution, and a number of the perpetrators were convicted and then hanged for the murders they perpetrated. That's the Australian story of the rule of law, of democracy. That happened in the 1830s in Australia, while the abolition of slavery, for example, in America was still some 30 years away. And for me, that explains, and Australians want to know that story, that history, and that explains and the success of Australia history. And it is also a book that is not it's also a work that is very different from so many other works of history, and I will compare it to a book that I've read this week, The Shortest History of Australia. So you can't get a bigger difference between Tony Abbott talking about how good Australia is and our bad parts, and The Shortest History of Australia by Mark McKenna. Mark McKenna is an emeritus professor of history in Sydney. He's the biographer of Manning Clark. He's written a number of histories of Indigenous Australia and made a very great contribution to Australian history writing. But in The Shortest History of Australia, he tells a story of unremitting gloom, of unremitting racism, of unremitting climate change. The book is 260 pages long, and I literally could find one positive reference to Australia, to this country, where he talks about our high rates of home ownership. And for me, reading books like The Shortest History of Australia, it makes me understand that, one, we have an elite professional historian class who can say nothing positive. And when I say that, that's not a rhetorical statement. I mean literally nothing positive about this country. It explains why the study of history is dying. So we've spoken about how the number of professional historians studying Australia is down by about 30% from 20 years ago. It explains why young people are not studying history. It explains the success of Tony Abbott's book. And it also goes to what is the story that people like Mark McKenna want to tell people coming to Australia. So he makes the important point that in 2021, Australia became the first English-speaking country in the world to become a majority migrant nation, meaning the proportion of Australian residents born overseas or who have a parent born overseas moved above 50%. So Australia is a migrant nation. So what Mark McKenna doesn't answer is, if Australia is as bad as he says it is, why does anyone want to come here? And what he also doesn't answer is, what is the story about Australia that we are going to tell the people who we welcome? And for me, the story about Australia is Tony Abbott's history. It's not Mark McKenna's.
Well, John, we'll have to leave it there. We got held over at the Senate committee. They held us over for an extra half an hour against our will. So we'll have to leave it there for this week. Good to chat, and we'll catch up again soon.